my dear friend, Penny Armbruster. Good to have you on the show. You're doing okay this morning on a Monday?
On a Monday. Is this where I say long time listener?
Long time, yes, and one that has made me think and has provoked some thoughts. As I really, you're one of the people that I really appreciate the feedback on, and so one of the things I've always appreciated about you, Penny, is you'll say, "Hey, you said this, and I didn't like that."
That's right. I'm in the bathroom brushing my teeth, listening to the podcast, and I'm like,
And
"Did I just say
you're
that?"
like, "Wait, is?" And you said one time you were like, "Man, I wish that this was like a live show where I could like call in." And I was like, "Yeah, man, we could maybe get some radio time and figure out maybe how to do that to have some active listening." But no, I appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship, and to use some Detroit language, I appreciate your hustle with everything that you do for the Luke Clinic, with everything that you do for your family, for the ministries that you have been involved in. I've been a big time admirer of you for a very long time, and so I want to say that just so that that's on the record for everyone to hear, because I really do. And God has used you in some miraculous ways, and I'm really, really, really excited to share with everyone else that may not know you, to get a feel for your heart and a feel for what God has called you and the staff and your families to do with the Luke Clinic. So this is going to be fun, I think.
Yeah, I'm excited. I like anything that, I'm all about real. Let's keep it real. And I'm always about being challenged. I like to be challenged in my faith, challenged in my thinking. I think getting out of our comfort zone and spending time with people who think differently is a really good thing. I think to challenge what we consider to be our core of our faith, our doctrine, if you like, is a really healthy thing, and I love that. So bring it on.
Let's go. So the first thing I want to ask you, Penny, is so first off, have you been a Lutheran your whole life?
No, I
No.
had
So
to think. I
how
had to think that through because it's felt like a lifetime.
it's
But
felt like a lifetime. Yeah.
I became a Christian when I was 26. I met my husband 2 weeks later in Bible study, and I call him my earthly reward. And we were living in
Hmm.
Germany, and in Europe, people have very small Bibles. And Larry walked into Bible study with the Lutheran NIV Study Bible, which, as you know, looks like a concrete block. And I was
Yes.
like, who is the guy with the massive Bible? Well, we met in an interdenominational church because that's all there was that was English speaking in Germany. And when we came back and we got married, then I realized that he was generationally Lutheran, which didn't really know what that meant. But ever since that moment, we have been in the LCMS church. So, yes,
Good.
I do
Well,
dip my toe in the non denominational. I do love a little bit of non denominational midweek service. And I've always very much appreciated um, different denominations and different places to worship and different ways to worship. And again, I like to be challenged in what I believe. But
yeah.
yes, can't say born and raised a Lutheran, but ever since I've been in this country, it has been solidly LCMS.
Well, that's great. But I agree wholeheartedly with you too. I think that this is one of the things that the Lutheran Church actually struggles with, is actually acknowledging that there are other denominations that actually do good things. and and so for the sake of non-denominational churches, I mean, I've worshipped in non-denominational churches before. I haven't partaken in the sacrament or anything like that, but I've certainly gone and worshipped, and I've been, there's nothing wrong with having those. I was just actually having this conversation with my wife last night, because I did some premarital counseling for a couple that I've been working with. They're getting married in September, and one of the things that he's struggling with is, when he was growing up, he went to a non-denominational church, and everyone around him was having like those emotional like experiences, right? Hands in the sky, like tears, sobbing, right? And he would always come home and he'd be like, "I'm not having that. Is something wrong with me?" And so there's like that perspective, but then the other perspective is that, I think sometimes the Lutheran Church will side on the fact of, well, we can't have any emotionalism. And I'm like, why can't you have emotionalism? Why can't you be so moved and overwhelmed by what you're experiencing in church and the grace and mercy of Jesus? Why can't you do that? And I think that from the non-denominational perspective, like that's something that they embrace, and I don't think that that's not a bad thing at all. And so,
Listen, when you travel around Michigan speaking in churches like we do,
mhm,
we run into congregations where people are in tears and have their hands in the air. And I find that a beautiful, beautiful place to be. And I have been in places where you've only got the organ and people are singing hymns, and there's a beauty in that too.
mhm,
And there's a variety. And typically when we're in an emotional place, I'm emotionally crying. My hands are in the air, or typically one hand's in the air and one hand is holding my Lutheran husband's hand, and he is stoically singing without a tear in
yeah,
his eye.
yeah,
But he will come out sometimes and he will describe his emotion to me, and it's just as valid. It's just not necessarily externally processed. But
yeah.
those Germans, it's down deep.
That's
It's
yes, 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 it is. Um, that's funny. Yeah, so it just because I know that have you so with the Loot Clinic, you've gone to you just mentioned you've gone to other congregations, you've gone to large Lutheran congregations, you've gone to small Lutheran congregations. Have you been to other denominations that support
yes,
the
yes, I
ministry?
have. I go to anybody who will support.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to share at a variety of churches. There's an amazing church in Plymouth that annually invites a ministry to come and share at one of their events, and I had the best of times sharing with them. I think the body of Christ coming together um, is one of the things that excites me the most. I think I became a Christian in a church that was an English speaking church in Germany, in a capital city, with people from all around the world, all different Christian faiths and different denominations would send a pastor. We'd get a Baptist pastor and then a Methodist pastor and then a Lutheran pastor. And I think that's probably what helped bring me to faith, because it went against a lot of my stereotypes of the church.
Mm.
So I love the variety, and I was probably at a pretty low point in my appreciation of the LCMS when I started this job. But the more I travel around to congregations, the more my faith is encouraged. And one of my favorite ones is a tiny little church in the Thumb. And I think a lot of the husbands were not in Bible study that morning because it was a harvesting day and it was a rural congregation. And all the wives were saying,
Oh,
sorry, when you've got to harvest, you got to harvest. But I think that was the most excited congregation I've ever spoke to. They were the most passionate, the most excited. They wanted to hear more. They didn't have a lot of judgment about what people in the inner city are like, and they just wanted to partner. And that's I've just come to love. I mean, maybe churches that invite me are missional and want to hear about that stuff. So maybe I'm getting a narrow sample, but the sample I get, I absolutely love.
yeah. I've been to congregations. Yeah, you see congregations that that want to write checks, and we love checks. We need the checks,
We do.
right?
Love a check.
And sometimes you have. I mean, we just had a congregation down yesterday from Lansing that came down and served. Now they're not going to come down every month to serve because that's a 2-hour drive with all the summer I-96 traffic. But that's a congregation that can support us with gifts and prayers. And I've even encouraged them yesterday. I was like, if you see something here at Family of God that works, use that in your own setting and try something new there. And if that's happened, then we've also done our job to do that. Um, I've seen congregations that that only want to support with money just because, and I don't know if you've experienced this too. Well, we can't come to Detroit because Detroit's dangerous.
Yeah, for sure.
So here's our check. And I was okay, thank you for the check. I would really encourage you to reconsider what your mindset is towards especially the southwest side of Detroit. um but I mean, we've had our fair share of our fair share of issues, but it's overall, I mean, it's a safe place. It's a place that people, that there's all kinds of people that love being together. And that's something that I've appreciated too. But then you get congregations like you said about like the one that's in the Thumb, and we have one that has supported us for a while. Um, when I worship or when I went there and led worship, because I was just filling in, and their pastor had asked me, he's like, hey, if you want to talk about the ministry, you're welcome to do that. And so I went through they had service and they had Bible study afterward, and I preached a sermon, and there was, I think, 15 people in church that Sunday, and they all every single one wanted to hear about the ministry afterward. And I talked for an hour. I put the slides up and stuff like that. And afterward, I mean, they were like, "We're gonna have." They said, "Sit tight. We're gonna have like an almost like an emergency, not an emergency, but like a impromptu voters meeting."
Yeah.
And they're like, "We're going to support you. We can't give you much, but we're going to support you." And one of the things that they've done is they do like collections, so like paper products, things that we desperately need, and they do these, and then they come down and they bring those to us. And the joy that they have in giving, the joy that they have in serving, they've served a meal before, like the joy that they have in serving their people, it's just, I haven't seen something like that in really big congregations. You have individuals within those big congregations, but as a whole, the smaller congregations, those are my favorites,
Yep.
to go to. Those are the real intimate ones. That's why I'm a big fan of congregations that are smaller, because you get the intimacy, you get the people that that genuinely love and know everything, everything about each other. And you just yeah, at churches that are big, yes, those are wonderful churches to be a part of. Yes, the support and everything like that, and we can't do what we do without those kinds of congregations. But there is something about the small ones, and
I
the
just
way that they serve.
brag about the LCMS. Let's have a brag about the LCMS moment,
Sure.
because they're few and far between
I,
sometimes.
I feel like
Um,
we probably, well, we just had convention, so I feel like we need a bragging moment.
and this has got nothing to do with doctrine. This is just solid heart. Um, as you are aware, we've got two clinics, one in Flint and one in Detroit, and we are a great compassion, great commission. We are sharing the love of Jesus, and we're taking care of those who need medical help. So when we hire a medical staff, we're looking for a very unusual nurse. We're looking for a nurse who's devoted and motivated by her faith or his faith, but it's typically her in the OB world,
Mhm.
to care for pregnant women and children. And it's very missional. You have to be very missional minded, and it is a significant task. It's a very rough, difficult place to be emotionally, and so it's hard to find. So I've been looking to replace my nurse who moved on to another job, and I was unable to. And so I had to take my nurse from Flint and move her to Detroit to cover my Detroit clinic, which means I had to temporarily close the Flint clinic because I don't have the staffing for it. And it's a brutal thing to do, to write a letter to congregations and partners and pregnancy centers to say you're temporarily closing. And it was awful to look these women in the face and to tell them we're not going to be able to continue with their care, but these are the plans that we have in place. And I got a call from a mission board of a large church in Clio. And he just said, our hearts broke when we read your letter.
Mhm.
Like, how can we pray for you? What can we do for you? Tell me more. And he wasn't asking me to say, can I write you a check? And I could have said, can I write you a check? And he probably would have said yes. That wasn't why he called. He called because he wanted to know how they could shore us up spiritually.
Right.
And I just told him, my gosh, you've no idea what this means for us, because it's so hard for us to have to do this. And he wanted to understand it more. And when I explained that, yes, I can send our clients out to other places, but the reason we exist is a lot of people don't want to take our clients. And especially if you don't have insurance, nobody wants you.
Right.
So we started to talk about, well, what are we going to do for those clients? And I said, well, I've got two volunteers who are willing to drive them to the Detroit clinic and be with them throughout their pregnancy, driving them to and fro. But they're not people who have a lot of money. And if it's about $100 to go there and back with all the
Mhm.
costs to your car. And he was excited and took back to his congregation the idea of, what if we, in the interim, we support these two women who are willing to drive to
Yeah.
Detroit? And what does that look like? And then typically you would give them supplies in Flint. What does it look like to give supplies, and how could we fill that? And it just blew my mind. I don't know if they're going to come back and do that, but that's not the point. The point was, they called because they cared and they wanted to know how we
Right.
were doing. How could they support us? They wanted to understand. And they wanted to know, until we reopen again, what can they do to serve the women of Flint? Uh, Amazing.
Yeah, I love when you hear stories of congregations, because I think sometimes, I mean, so I always say that at some point, and this again, I want to make this very clear to the listener. Like, this is not a blanket statement against Lutherans at all. At being a Lutheran pastor, for you being in the Lutheran Church, like, I love the Lutheran Church. I love our doctrine. I love our church. I love being a part of this community of believers. And but sometimes I think that we actually get there's like a disconnect between in Ephesians 2, right, where it says, "For as by grace you have been saved through faith, which is a gift, right, not of yourself, so that no one can boast," right? And then we stop at verse 9, because verse 10 says, "For you are God's handiwork," or craftsmanship, that he has created to do the good works that are put in front of you, right? And so we as Lutherans, we're like, well, we don't want to do these good works because we don't want to fall on the works righteousness side. And it's like, yeah, but scripture's littered with places that says faith without works is dead. And so, like, it's not, I don't want to say it's not good enough, but like, to be a congregation that says, "Oh, we'll pray for you," like, that's great, thank you for that. But then when you actually take that the next step and you say, "Okay, you call us, well, we're devastated by what this is." So this reminds me of this word compassion that I've talked about over and over and over again. They were so heartbroken by what happened that they wanted to do something.
Mhm.
So how is it that we can help you, right? What can we do to support you to ensure that these women receive the care that they so desperately need?
Mhm.
That is marvelous when I hear stories like that amongst congregations. And I think when you're a part of ministries like the Luke Clinic, like Franklin Avenue, like Family of God, like Allie's House, like St. Paul and Pontiac, like all these other missions that are around the Detroit, Pontiac, Flint area, you see people like that and congregations like that, and it just really gives you that. It's like, man, this makes me really happy and excited to be a part of Synod, right? To be a part of this harmonious, being together and doing things together. That's awesome. So with you mentioned the Luke Clinic within Flint is closing, right? And so that's certainly it's not
Temporarily.
a I was going to say that's a temporary thing. That's not a permanent thing. That's not, something that's going to happen. But a lot of there have been things that have been going on, and one of the things that we were talking about before we hit the record button was that sometimes Satan can do things and drive wedges and stop ministry from happening. And that comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. That comes from, churches and people that just say, "Hey, we don't want to do this anymore." That comes from, interpersonal communications. It comes from, I've been at the Luke Clinic in Detroit when there have been, women that have escalated. Was it 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, when there was that incident that happened outside where, like, one family was on one side of the street and the other family was on the
was
other side of
it
the
was
street?
a knockdown, drag out fight in the street,
Oh
but it
my
was a fight of
God,
words. There was a lot of words, but there was a
a
lot of it
lot
was
of
very
words.
passionate. Yes.
Poor poor Deacon John during that time. He's just sitting there out in the out in the road, just like not doing anything, just standing there, because he's like, he felt like, if I walk, like, these girls are gonna come and
Seriously,
have the
it's a
all
lot
out
of
thing.
pregnant women who shouldn't be fighting who are standing in the
Oh,
street.
yeah,
Yes.
and I give all the credit to some of the friends that were like they were like, I mean, this is a PG-13 podcast, but where they're like, she's like, it's called her a name. She's like, I don't want to say the name, but you know what I'm talking about. She says, "You can't." She says, "Girl, you can't do this. You're 38 weeks pregnant." Right? Like, you can't actually do this. And she's like, "I don't care. I don't care." I'm like, you should care, right? So pray you're thankful for those moments, but that's an instance too where, like, you would come home and you'd be like, "What the hell just happened here today?" Like, is what we're doing worth it? And right, so Satan can cause suffering amongst the congregations, amongst the ministries, um, to try to prevent God's will from being done. As we both know, God's will, you cannot stop God's will from being done. Um, and that happens in spite of sin, in spite of all this. But part of being in ministry like this is suffering, just in general. And if, as the Suffering Servants podcast, you are a suffering servant, we are suffering servants together. As I'm interested to hear your perspective as a non-pastoral, as a non professional church
Okay.
worker, as an executive director of a ministry.
Yeah.
From your perspective, like, talk a little bit about suffering, just like the nature of suffering, how you've seen it, how does God work through that? What is it that the Christian learns from this, uses in this, and just from your perspective of being immersed in suffering, for the lack of a better term. I mean, you're immersed in it with the Loop Clinic, and so from your perspective, what does that look like?
Well, that's like a massive question, like a
Yes.
dissertation almost. Never mind, summarize that in 5 minutes. But um, so I didn't become a Christian until I was 27. And before I became a Christian, I was raised in an environment that you're responsible for yourself, for your own happiness, your own success. It's a lot of pressure on you. And I was also, my larger family had encompassed some abuse and some addiction issues and just this, some really difficult things in life that people were trying to deal with. And I was trying to differentiate myself by being the best person I could be, the hardest working. I'm like an average, kind of a B plus student, but I was in an environment where everybody else was an A plus student. And so I was just working, working, working to achieve good feedback, people being proud of me, success, affirmation. And that continued and continued. And I felt like I was carrying pain with me, but I didn't really have an answer for it. Um, just kept trying harder. And I kept thinking, well, if I get this, if I do this, if I achieve this, um, it's going to feel better. And I've definitely always been somebody who has, well, I'm very divisive. So you either love me or hate me. Okay. So there's definitely a whole group of people who've not been comfortable with me, but there's always been a group of people who have been, I've got respect for you. I've got respect for your work ethic. I've got respect for your mind. I've got respect for the things that you've achieved. But really, when I became a Christian, it was such a relief that I'm not in control. That I felt like, looking back on it, that there was suffering before I became a Christian, in that sort of torturous tension between knowing that I'm broken, knowing that I can't do it, knowing that I'm not enough, knowing that I'm in pain, and then just trying to externally achieve. So I feel like there was, in my life, that's like the first moment where I feel like God's word did not tell me there will not be suffering anymore. He didn't tell me it's not going to be painful, but he promised that he'd be with me and he wouldn't leave me. And he promised me that he had a plan for my life that was written before I was even born. And I cling to that. I cling to that. I think my husband and his family had a huge commitment to service and to serving others, and a love and a passion for serving others. And within the church, that became a passion for mission. And as a family, we've always been passionate about service and mission. And I think in my immediate family, I've seen that Satan has attacked our family. I think I remember a pastor friend of ours saying that he felt like his children had been attacked. That's how
Mhm.
Satan attacked him. And I think that's been the same in our family. I think it's been a roller coaster of struggles. My husband worked for a company for many, many years, and then took a package to leave. And then we started working for startups, and the startups would do great. Then they'd be sold, someone would buy them, and then lay off all the management team. And we'd go to another startup. And I think we just were laid off multiple times for like 12 to 18 months at a time. And so my husband, I think, was very much attacked with his work. And my children have just been through a lot. In our family, we've experienced some really horrific, the things that parents would say that is horrific, and that would be the one thing I would never want for my child. Oh, I've been through that with my children. My children have been through that. But at the same time, the miracle and the grace is, it has not turned any of us away. It has drawn
Yeah.
us all closer.
Yeah.
But it's that, what's that? Again, you said I'm a layperson, not a pastor, so I don't want to even remotely sound like I'm pastoral, but I think of that simul justus et peccata, that opposite, that we're sinner and saint,
Hmm.
that we feel hope, but we have hope, that we're suffering and we're struggling, but we know there's more. And so it's not a million miles away to be taken into the Loop Clinic, because in the vacuum of any kind of moral guidance as a child, um, I fell hook, line, and sinker for the feminist model. And I was very involved in the abortion movement at college. I was women's officer for my entire college. I kicked doctors off campus if they weren't pro-choice. Um, and I think it's very redemptive of God that he brings me back now to a
Yeah.
situation that's pro-life. But I think as women, it doesn't take much to understand another woman. There are things that are similar to women, the pressures, the guilt, the traumas. And so what I see now is that I was in that environment the first time, but with very little understanding
Yeah.
about hope, grace, and mercy. Now I'm in a situation with women who need help, who are struggling, who aren't weak. They're incredibly strong. They're
Yeah.
incredibly strong women. They are not victims. But because I've received that hope, because God comforted me in my affliction and in my struggles and in my children's struggles, I feel that now I have something that I can bring to the table. I've got something that's real, that I can offer, that through my experiences, I have been given a greater appreciation and understanding to walk with people. I'm not solving anybody's problems. I certainly didn't solve any of my children's or my husband's or my problems, but I know the importance of having somebody to walk through suffering with you. And I say to every patient when I do patient orientation, I don't know what you were struggling with when you came in here today. I don't know if you know where you're sleeping tonight, or you know what you're feeding your children for lunch by the time you finish here today. I don't know whether you're happy to be pregnant or terrified to be pregnant, whether you wanted to be pregnant or you were coerced into pregnancy.
Hmm.
Um, but what I do know is when you leave here today, you won't be on your own.
Yeah.
And that to me is the gift that I was given when I became a Christian, that I realized I'm not on my own. Jesus is with me. And then more profoundly, he has gracefully given me my husband, my church, my small group, people to walk through me in life. I don't think we are ever going to be without suffering because we live in a broken world.
Yeah.
But it's very easy in this world, Tyler, to find yourself without anybody you can be real with.
Yeah.
And there's a complete lack of trust, as you know, in Detroit and Flint for very good reason. So we have to build that trust, and that just takes time. And what people are looking for is something genuine. And it's about listening and walking alongside and being with.
I
Sorry,
heard that.
Mike. And, I think one of the things I say that makes people very uncomfortable in the church is I don't believe we've gone down to Detroit to insert our Christian values into this community and to expect them to make choices that we think they should make. I think that's the wrong order of things. I think that we're walking through life with them. And as we get to share who our Jesus with, and as we get to process and ideally introduce Jesus to them, then the Holy Spirit will begin to convict them of the changes that need to be made. I am not the Holy Spirit. I have not gone down there. I have gone down there to hopefully provide choice. That's what we provide at the Loop Clinic is.
All right, we're back. Satan's kicking us off and trying to have his way with us. Ironically, as we're talking about suffering, so in Satan's work. But do you, if you could remember where we left off?
I
Um,
think I can. I think I was saying that I don't think anybody wants to have an abortion. I think they feel they have one because they have no choice.
yeah,
So I really feel in the Loop Clinic, we're about listening to the individual and their situation and where are they at and what are the barriers to keeping this baby. And sometimes we can address those. We can address no prenatal care, no insurance, don't have a stable home to live in, experiencing violence and don't feel safe, can't afford any more children. Like there are things we can do. There are things we can walk through. And um, I feel that being able to offer those choices, being able to walk with those women, and sometimes what we offer is not enough. Sometimes they still turn away and make that choice. And there's no condemnation from me. I don't talk
Yeah.
about killing babies. I don't talk about different methods of abortion. When I know the door is closed, there are two things. One is that we start praying in earnest, and the other is I say, look, we're here for you. We have a 24/7 triage line. If you need us medically, we're here. We're not cutting you off. We keep relationship. We don't facilitate abortion. We don't arrange abortion. We don't drive women for abortions. We don't refer and make appointments for them. But we try to gracefully stand in that gap to be somebody that they can talk to. And I know you have mentioned to me specifically that there are times where prayer is the most powerful thing we can do, and somebody is left absolutely intent that they are having an abortion, and we have prayed, and the next day they have called and said they changed their mind.
Yeah.
I mean, our statistic on paper is that we've seen over 1,000 patients, and 10 of them have chosen abortion that we know about. That's what we
Yeah.
know about. I don't want to say
Right.
that's the exact statistic, but I'm like, it's low. It's a low statistic for us because we're able to offer help. But we're not going in and impressing our spiritual beliefs because they're not Christian yet. Until they're
Right.
Christian, we can't expect them to operate like that. That's why we have 9 months of prenatal care and 12 months of infant care. We want time to medically care for them, but we want time to grow that relationship and mature them in their
Right.
understanding.
Yeah, I that reminds me of that's me. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Family of God wanted to partner with the Loot Clinic so long ago too, is because of that. You're talking about that relationship aspect. Everything that the Loot Clinic does is relationship based, right? And so for Family of God, who also is relationship based. I mean, I've had people that have said, "Well, how come you don't have somebody at the front door, as people come in, telling them about Jesus?" And I literally said, "Because they don't care." They really don't. It's not that they don't care about Jesus, but if you come after somebody, that's not come after, but if you present Jesus to somebody who has no idea who you are, this is why the street preacher model doesn't work. It can work. I'm not going to say the Holy Spirit can't use that, but this is why that generally does not have good success, is because someone's looking at that person and says, "I have no idea who you are, and you're telling me something that sounds crazy," right? I mean, the gospel is crazy. The gospel does not make any sense. The gospel is bonkers, out of this, outside of ourselves kind of a deal, and it's supposed to be that way. It's folly to the world, and so in order for someone to be brought into that, I think that relationship is so important because when what we tell everyone with Family of God is that when you have spent all this time feeding people, when you spend all this time clothing people, when you spend all this time praying over people and just getting to know them with a non-judgmental attitude, like obviously for us, addiction, that's the thing that ravages the Family of God ministry. We're not coming in and telling all the drug addicts that come and see us, you need to leave your life of addiction. I mean, obviously that's the goal, that's what we want, but leading with that is not the best approach. What we want to do is be with them, talk with them, allow them to see that we love them and care for them and genuinely love them, and then the Spirit will give you those opportunities. And so with the Luke Clinic too, I mean, one of the things that you've said when I've heard you speak before, that has always struck me, has been that these women that come and see you, because I've reiterated this with the ministries or the churches that I've shared at too. When women come to the Luke Clinic, whether it's at the Flint Clinic or the Detroit Clinic, they they don't feel like they're just another statistic. The women that go and go right through, a regular doctor or just go right to the hospital or whatever. You've said multiple times that they feel that they're just another number. They don't feel that they're cared for, and so that's ultimately what the difference is between the medical care that the Luke Clinic provides and the medical care that, whatever else provides, especially in the city where a lot of women are either underinsured or don't have insurance at all. Doctors don't have time for that. They
So
don't want to.
we know that people walk through the doors of Family of God because they're cold,
Yeah,
because they're hungry, because they need prenatal care. Um, that's the drive of why they've walked in the door. But they've also walked in the door and they're waiting to be overlooked.
yeah,
They're waiting to be judged. They're waiting to be minimalized. They're waiting to be treated poorly because of the color of their skin or because of the fact that they smell and they're not clean. Um, so we're blessed that something drove them into the door.
right.
And so the first thing I want to do is acknowledge that walking through that door is a blessing to me and is an achievement for them. And it's actually for my women, it's a mountain they've just climbed because somehow
Yeah,
without transportation, they had to make it to my clinic.
right.
Somehow they had to get their kids to the clinic. Um, that is a mount. They might not know where they're sleeping that night and what they're going to eat. And so to take time to take care of their own prenatal care, that's usually the bottom of the list, taking care of themselves. So when they
Yeah,
they make it in, it's such an achievement that they're here that I just want to be like, congratulations,
right.
you are so welcome. I know you're hungry. Here is a snack bag. We have churches that make these beautiful snack bags with little
Hmm.
notes in them and healthy foods. Like, here, sit down, come in our waiting room. The waiting room is a safe place. There's food
Right.
here. There's a team waiting to talk to you. They're not waiting to, worst case scenario, shove Jesus down your throat, but best case scenario, be the hands and feet of
Right.
Jesus. Love on you. I have a massage therapist, and she just acknowledges that these women have been through horrific sexual trauma and being
Yeah.
touched is a very risky thing for them. But she'll
Yeah.
do these essential oil hand massages because the hand is the safest place to touch. And
Mm.
so she can welcome them and say, would you like a massage? And then it pretty much goes to a shoulder massage very quickly. And we're just talking about stress and we're just listening and we're just connecting. We just want to hear what's been happening with you. And we have visual faith ministries coloring sheets, and the women find it very peaceful to color these beautiful coloring sheets with scripture verses on. And we've got games being played and kids are being taken care of. um, we acknowledge what it takes to even get there. So if we can't make that waiting room a place that you're safe, we don't really have a hope of getting you upstairs into the clinic and you feeling that you can be real and trust your
Right.
doctor.
Yeah.
So I even tell my student nurses when they come, look, you might think vitals is the most boring job in the clinic,
Mm.
and you now I don't want to take blood pressures, height, and weight. Like I want something
Right.
exciting. But blood pressure, height, and weight is our relationship build. That's the
Yeah.
first medical provider that you come to. And a patient told me once, Miss Penny, you know that Black men don't trust the police. Well, Black women, we don't trust healthcare providers.
Yeah.
And that I've seen it over and over again. And I've seen that there's a good reason for that. You and I have both witnessed uh, women telling their stories, women who are not poor, but who should, in theory, be able to advocate for themselves, but have
Yeah.
told us stories of how they've been treated in hospitals. And so we understand that our patients come having not been treated well. So we want to build the relationship and the trust, and then we want to get them upstairs. And there's no time limit. If you
Right.
need a long time, you've got a long time. And we're going to have everything in one place and make it easy. You can have your ultrasound, do your lab work, see your doctor, spend time with your nurse. We want to give you time. And we don't even expect on that first appointment. I mean, I do know that you're going to be a bit blown away at the end of your
Mm.
first appointment, but
Yeah.
trust is going to take 2 or 3 appointments to build. And that's legitimate and that's reasonable. But what I love is at Thanksgiving last year, I forgot that I was supposed to be doing a social media campaign. And so I kind of ran around with my phone and just said to everyone with no preparation whatsoever, I've got to do a social media campaign for Thanksgiving. Is there anything that you're thankful for at the Luke Clinic? And I just videoed them. And just over and over and over again, without hearing everybody else's input, they use the word family.
Mm.
No coincidence that you're called family of God,
Yeah.
because the ultimate trusting relationship is a healthy family. And when they say the Loop Clinic is our family, we come here and we know that we're loved and we know that we're cared for.
Yeah.
That's the biggest achievement, because if in a place where there's suffering outside the doors of Family of God, but the suffering inside. My staff have suffered. My volunteers have suffered. They may be suffering. They may be struggling. We're not living a life without suffering, but we can come together and we can say, let's walk through this together. And
Yeah.
to me, that is the ultimate place of family.
Do you Yeah, there was one time, there was this one girl who I think actually she might have been a patient of yours at one point. The son's name is Jeremiah. This was a while ago. I don't want to say her name because I don't want it to, we can talk sidebar, but anyway, I'm fairly certain that she was a patient at one point. And there was one time she came in and I forgot what the context was, but she was just super happy and she just said, "What's up, family?" like this was just just very loud. She was super happy to be at your, it was a non-clinic day. She was just super happy, and it was just like, it just made me think of just like what you just said, that for so many people that are in the Southwest Detroit area, whether they're coming to the Loop Clinic, whether they're coming to Family of God, if they're on the east side of Flint at Franklin, right? That's their family, because everything else has been lost in their lives to violence, to addiction,
Oh
to
my gosh.
abuse, to incarceration, to hospitalization, whatever it may be, right? When you get to that point where you're at a place like Family of God, like the Loop Clinic, that's what they have, and that's all that they have to hold on to. And so when that's what they have and they realize the value of that, when the Spirit moves in them and allows them to see that value, and they see just how much that you ladies and the gentlemen that are there, that love these women so very much, even when they are being so difficult to love. I've seen, and
One,
they see you, and I
yeah,
think that's a testament to the Spirit too, because they see you loving them when they're being unlovable, right? They see
yeah,
you forgiving when they're being unforgivable. They see you serving when they're being ungrateful. And so that speaks volumes to the nature of a ministry like the Loop Clinic, is when you take on that mentality. That's one thing that Pastor Hill has said and preaches a lot at new churches that we go and visit, is loving the unlovable, serving the ungrateful, and forgiving the unforgivable. And that's where you see Jesus come into play. And that's when the Spirit opens up those opportunities for you all to preach, for you all to share God's word, for you all to share Jesus. You don't hit it with it right away, because it genuinely comes up in the conversations that you have, always at some point, some way,
yeah.
shape, or form.
Even if it doesn't, sometimes, yeah, I know that expression, share Jesus, and if you have to use words, is doctrinally, a bit of a joke. But at the same time, there's an element of truth to that. Like the patient
Sure.
that we referred to earlier that was out fighting at 38 weeks
Hmm.
called me the white-haired bitch for a very, very long time. And she was not a big fan of me. Um, but I think she might be on her second or third child with us.
Yeah.
And even though she calls me that because I encourage some structure that she doesn't appreciate and some behaviors that she struggles with, I try to eliminate. I've consistently loved her, as has my
Yeah.
team. And I think now she's actually fervently one of our biggest supporters.
Yeah.
And she acted like she hated us for
Yeah.
the first 2 years and never said thank you, never was grateful, always left in an angry mood. But the other thing you have to understand when we talk about suffering is that is a trauma response. A
Absolutely, it
trauma
is.
response is to self-sabotage, to I'm going to get you mad with me, and then I'm going to go, I knew you weren't going to love me.
Mm.
I'm
Yep.
going to behave in such a way that no one can love me. I'm going to say, see, I knew I was unlovable.
Right.
You're going to try and control everything because you've had so little control in your life that your fear trauma response is to have this white knuckled grip of control. And I think that's one of the reasons that last year we decided that we were going to just invest heavily in behavioral health counseling and
Hmm.
addressing the trauma plays in the perinatal period, because I would say 90% of our patients have experienced childhood trauma. And so when you can recognize this is not personal, this is a trauma response, then what we have to do is work with them to recognize what is your trauma? How has it affected you? How are you responding? How are you self-sabotaging? How are you undermining yourself? What kind of mother do you want to be? What kind of partner do you want to be?
Yeah.
And how are you undoing that yourself with your actions?
Hmm.
And I think that's been one of the most important things that we've done in the last couple of years, and the things that the staff that we have brought in, whether they are behavioral health counselors or a psychologist or even a prayer team member who has a heart specifically to recognize, understand, redirect, and help in these areas. It's so important because you can just look and go, why is that 38-week woman, pregnant woman, fighting in the street and yelling obscenities across the street to somebody?
Hmm.
Is she just a difficult, angry Black woman? Well, let me tell you, she is a difficult, angry Black woman. Why is she difficult, angry, and
Right.
Black? I would be difficult and angry if I had experienced what she's
Right.
experienced. Like, let's
Absolutely.
help her. Let's help her find some other coping mechanisms that no one's ever showed her or taught her. Let's not just judge her. Let's just try to understand. And the longer I'm there, the more I think it is about providing safety. It is about relationship. It is about grace
Hmm.
and understanding. And then it's about a journey, which is going to be a lifetime journey. Sanctification is not overnight. As we begin to just address and make those changes and allow the Holy Spirit to lead that. We've just got to be patient.
Yeah.
And we're not really awfully
No,
patient.
no, we're not. No, we're not. I often, think about the things that we experience with some of the addicted folks that come to Family of God. A lot of the same things. I firmly believe in. When I had Pastor Riley on this podcast, he was talking about trauma based and how trauma
Mhm.
is a that most most addictions, if not all addictions, begin with some kind of trauma, and that's how you're trying to cope. And so, you've had women who have come in that are also addicted, that are also using and abusing, because that's how they've coped with the sexual abuse as children, as young women, as a product of the neighborhood. These endless vicious cycles that these women have been in for years and years and years. When you start to understand the nature of addiction, when you start to understand the nature of trauma and what that all leads to, I think it does actually affects your approach, and it actually allows you to be a little bit more. You don't
Mhm.
take it personally when someone calls you a name like that, right? It doesn't get personal when someone tells me to go F myself because I didn't give them $5 to go to the bus when I know that your dealer is waiting outside and you owe him $5, right? Like those you learn not to take those things seriously. I will say though, and this is I want to get your opinion on this too, is that one of the things that I struggle with, and my wife can attest to this as well. I struggle leaving things there. I
Mhm.
take things
Yeah.
with me, and I think about it a lot. I think about the people that we serve, the people that I've encountered, the conversations that I've had, the tears that I've shed with people about people. Do you find that you and your staff take things home with you, and how is it that you all cope with things like that?
Well, just so you know, my husband likes to remind me not to bring the patients home. And he doesn't mean in my mind, he means physically. Because
Physically,
I
because
have
he knows that
actually,
you would, right?
I
Yes.
have actually taken multiple
Yeah.
patients home. Because when we have somebody who's been violently beaten and I call 23 shelters and nobody has room,
Right.
I'm not sending that woman back out to nothing, to sleep in
Yeah.
her car, to go back to an abuser. So I sometimes physically take people home. I've gotten a lot better with that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think there's no way not to. And it's recognized. It's recognized in the field of psychology and counseling and medicine that you have to put things in place to be able to cope. And one of those things that, for example, my prayer team, I heard from a lot of my staff that they cry on the way home
Mm.
and in the car. And I said, okay, we've got to do something different. So I know my prayer team, they meet at the end of clinic. They share with each other what they've heard, the burdens they've carried, the difficulties. They pray for the people, but then they pray for one another as they go home to be able to give it to the Lord to be able to still continue to pray it, but not necessarily let it weigh you down, because it's kind of like that theory of you've got to put your own oxygen mask on a
Right.
plane before your child, because if you're not
Right.
okay, how can you help your child? Or if you're falling over dead because of the burdens that you've carried, you're no good to anybody. So I think you and I think we probably spend a lot of time just having real conversations with each other about
Yeah.
difficulties, and we're not complaining. Well, sometimes we're complaining.
Sometimes we're complaining.
Sometimes we're complaining, but even that, you've got to be able to complain, because when you watch people make the same mistake again and again and again, and you watch somebody self-sabotage, and you watch somebody
Mhm.
who was clean fall off the wagon, there's an
Yeah.
element of complaining, like, oh my gosh, this is happening again. But there's an element of just, you've got to share that pain. You've got to share the brokenness. You've got to be real about how you're feeling, because if you try to carry it, you'll be in serious trouble.
Right.
And yes, there's this idea of giving it to God, but you give it to him and then you take it back 10 seconds later, and you give it and you take it. It's a
Yeah.
process, but it's a skill you need to learn, because our success rate, if you wanted to measure success rate, we have one success rate, which is alive and a healthy birth and a healthy mom. And
Right.
luckily that one's good. But there are other measures of success, like you'd like to see some changes. But when you're dealing with women experiencing domestic violence, it takes on average 7 horrific situations before somebody makes a change. So
Mm.
how are you going to walk through the journey with them in the first 6? And that's
Yeah.
the average. So you might have a patient, it takes 12. I have one patient I've been working with for 7 years. And that patient now has none of her children, and her children are all in foster care.
Mm.
And I am connected with the children in foster care, and I'm connected with the mom. Have I struggled walking with that mom for 7 years of unfortunate decisions? Yeah, I really have. And she's probably the one I've been closest to for years. And I've seen moments of huge success and moments of huge failure. But I think we just have to be real with each other. That to be in ministry like this, we have to be supportive of one another, and we have to be
Yeah.
able to acknowledge the struggles. And we need prayer. We need prayer. We need
Yeah.
respite. Sometimes we just need to step away. When I'm on vacation, I've got my staff texting me. I've got patients texting me. But I'm much better about saying, I'm on vacation. I love you. And when I come back next week, let's meet.
Right.
We've got to be better at having boundaries, but we've got to just acknowledge that if you're going to stay in this kind of ministry in the long term, unless you want it to take a toll on you and your family especially, because you're choosing your patients and your ministry over your family all the time, because people are calling you with genuine crises.
Right.
But there are times where you're just playing a game of chess with your kids, and your game of chess with your kid at that moment is more important than your staff who's helping somebody with a crisis. And you have to say, it's my day off. I
Yeah.
can't help you right now. You need to call so-and-so, or I'll call you back in an hour. And those kind of habits are important to cultivate. And you need to be held accountable by people around you to say, you know what, you're getting sucked in again. And
Yeah.
that's not helping you be good at what you're doing, and it's not good for your family.
Yeah, one of the things that I've appreciated about Deaconess Terry, you've gotten to meet Deaconess Terry, and she was on the podcast. She had a really good episode. I enjoyed enjoyed facilitating that conversation, and I know a lot of people enjoyed that episode too. But one of the things that I've really appreciated about her, I don't know if you've noticed this, Penny, Family of God. There's a lot of masculine energy there.
Really? You just surprised me.
Yeah, right. And so it's been wonderful to have a female presence there on a regular basis. And because because obviously men and women handle things differently, and one of the things that Terry has been keeping me accountable with has been, like, when was the last time that you slept well? When was the last time that you took your wife out to dinner? When was the last time that you, and she's always making sure that I'm doing those things, understanding, that not every, you are going to have moments where, all right, you do have to, like you said, you do have to select, to put your patients or put your people over your family. And Brandy is awesome, and I'm sure it sounds like Larry is like this too. of understanding that. But
Yeah.
at the same time, they're like, "Hey, I'm still like I'm still here. Please don't forget about me." And I
Yeah.
think that that's a really I see too many people within ministry that get sucked into the um, well, I'm serving God by serving these people, and I'm like, well, you're also serving God when you're serving your family too, and you're not, and you're actually you don't make your ministry an idol where you neglect the other people in your life that God has called you to serve. And I think that there's always room for improvement with that. And you're right. We need the accountability, and you've helped me to be accountable to that as well. And so,
Well, and I think we
um,
have to remember that we felt called to this. And I tell my children, when you get married, you are by nature called to the same things that the other one is called to.
mhm,
And in all honesty, when you pray about opportunities, if one of you is getting a big fat no and one of you is getting a big fat yes, it's a no. Because by nature, what one is called to, you're both called to. So for sure, my husband is supportive of my ministry, beyond supportive. And my kids are supportive of my ministry. Um, but I've extended my ministry into my family life at times. Like at one point, I realized that when my patients go to hospital, they've got nobody to care for their kids while they go and deliver. And so we got certified as temporary foster families so that we could take
mm,
kids of patients. And my family was all, hooray for this. This is great. Let's do it. And then we just hit a point where they were like, this is too much. Like this is just overwhelmingly too much. When these children come, they need all five of us
right,
on deck. And as kids left home and went to college, and I had to just be able to say, gosh, this has been so important to me, but we have to let it go. And I don't feel ready to let it go, but my family's needing me to let it go. And there's times where I have not done a good job of listening to my family and not making the right choice. And it's really hurt them. And I have felt so torn. Like the calls that you get, the desperation on the end of the phone that I want to be there for that patient, but I
right.
have to be able to say I can't help. Um,
Well, and
but
there's other times too where you actually can't help. And so like we Pastor Hill and I get phone calls a lot of people that are in these situations where the literally the only thing that we can do is pray with them. That's the
yeah,
only thing that we can do. Sometimes the situations you're in such a bad spot where where the only thing is, okay, I either buy you a home, which I can't do, um but I can pray with you and I can make sure that you have the things necessary to get you to the next day. I mean, and honestly, that's you get to the point where you rely on what Jesus says in the Lord's Prayer. What He teaches us to pray, he says, "Give us this day our daily bread," right?
I
And so
know.
He gives us enough to get through the next day. That's the promise. He will continue to provide for us day on a day by day basis, and then on the day that you are taken to be with Him, then that's His will, and He says, "Okay, that then He's provided for you in the most ultimate way, which is taking you to be with Him." And so um that's that yeah it's boundaries are tough when it comes to the line of work that I think that we're both in, especially dealing with crises, because it's like, well, we're dealing with we're people, we're called to serve people, we're called to help them, and it really sucks when someone presents to you a situation that you can't help with. I think that's what I struggle with the most, is because I'm a
Which is the
fixer by
majority.
nature. Yeah, I'm a fixer by nature, and so when there's something that's given to me that I can't fix, that was one of the things that I struggled with my wife's. Both of us have various mental health issues, and one of the things that when we were talking through some of her stuff, I was like, I, I can't fix this, and it's driving me crazy, right? And so you get the same thing with when you get someone who's addicted, or you get someone who's in this endless cycle of abuse. I want to fix it, and I can't fix it. I've gotten you into your rehab facility. I've gotten you into a new home. I've gotten you into into a woman's shelter, but you made the conscious choice to go
Yeah.
back. You made the conscious choice over and over and over again to do these things, and it's just like it just that weighs on you. And
The trick
what
is
are
to realize the self-sabotage that they're doing. You're referring to your and Brandy's mental health. Same for us and our family. Like we've all got a dysfunctional pattern of coping. And my childhood was about trying harder and working harder and
Mhm,
performing. And so when I struggle to help a patient, I just keep thinking if I try harder, if I do more, if I put more effort in, I can do something.
yeah,
And that is an exercise in futility. And so we need to run our ministries in a way that we have created permission in our teams to be real, honest, and call each other on the carpet. And if I don't lead by example, I can't be expecting my staff.
Yeah.
The hardest thing for my team is to not work overtime and to not take phone calls and answer texts at the weekends. And because a lot of what we're doing isn't just medical, we always do the medical that's covered 24/7,
Right.
but the non-medical stuff, and it is it's always going to be the hardest thing we do. And we laugh and say, oh, we just hired someone who has terrible boundaries. Fabulous, they're going to be the best employee ever. That's the best team member, the one who has no boundaries and who's up for anything.
Right.
But we joke about that, but in a way, we have to be so careful that we don't venerate. We're super spiritual people. We're super good at what we do. We're the best missionaries because we give over and above
Yeah.
what we are able to give. That is not a healthy thing. That's not what God calls us to. We're called to our families. We're called to our marriages. I think, for me, before I'm called to my vocation.
Well, being a wife and being a mom is a vocation. Those are your vocations too, and so
Yeah.
it's not that those aren't your vocations. It's those are different vocations that God has called you to, and so and to serve effectively in all of those vocations, you have to balance yourself. And ultimately, I think that that's what it comes down to. And obviously, you and I have had those kinds of conversations for quite some time about doing things that are also not just good for us. And it's almost like we don't need. I've gotten to a point now as a 32-year-old man. I know that you just turned 32 not that long ago.
About the 25th time, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I've been, when I was 20, when I was 25, I was like, oh, I can just, I will make decisions like for me and things like that. But now I've got to a point where like, I care like what's good and what's healthy for me. But ultimately, I think what drives most of my decisions now is what's good for my wife and what's good for my family,
Mhm. Yeah.
and what's good for the people at the family of God too. Like, is taking on that extra, that extra church visit that might allow us to partner where they can help us if I'm a little tired on a Monday morning, like, okay, because I was out in Lansing not that long ago, and I was driving all over which way, driving back on a Monday because for a Monday night service, but that led to their congregation coming down and seeing us yesterday. Excuse me, coming down and seeing us yesterday, and could very well potentially lead to this congregation doing something more. So, like, when you think about the congregation, you think about the potential that has. I think that you start to, because when you take care of yourself, you're not being selfish. I think that um, that's not the case. And I think sometimes people think that, well, if you're taking time for yourself to recharge, well, that's just selfish of you. I don't think that at all, because when you're, like you said, if your oxygen mask is not on you, how are you able to help another person? And there will be moments where you do sacrifice. You've made sacrifices. I've made sacrifices for the sake of other people. But ultimately, we do things for others. And we also have to make sure that we're able to give that. Is that you're not going to drive from Detroit to Flint on an empty tank of gas,
And it's not about
right?
you. God doesn't
No.
need you to achieve this ministry.
Right.
And
Yes.
if you make it all about you, if I don't do this, if I don't take this call, if I don't take this speaking, you've missed everything, because God doesn't need me to achieve his purpose. And I don't, again, I hate quoting a scripture in case I'm, as a layperson, I'm completely getting it wrong. Don't tell me if I've
Hmm,
got this one
hmm.
wrong, because it's a good one for me. When it says, come to me, all you who are weary, because my yoke is easy and my burden is light. When my job is I'm dragging and it's too much for me, then what I basically have got it down to now, I'm doing more than he's called me to. I've picked up to carry more than he wanted me to pick up. That perhaps he had other people who were going to take on that. And because I jumped to pick it up, I didn't give that other person the chance to. And that is definitely my personality, is to just go, 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 go. And yet this time something needs to hit the floor, because he had a plan for someone else to do it. And I don't think anybody in our organization wanted to close Flint except for me.
Yeah.
But I felt like, okay, this is what we need, because I can't keep asking my staff to work overtime. I can't keep asking them to do more, to cover more, to keep pushing. We have to be at peace and know that this clinic is the Lord's, and the Lord cares about these women in Flint way
Right.
more than we do. And in the 2 weeks since we made this decision, I've had one wonderfully large congregation give me a check for 20,000. I've had
Oh,
others come to me with prayer. I've had others asking what they can do. There's so many things that we need to reopen Flint. We need financial stability. We need a staff member. We need that clinical care nurse for Detroit. But if I just forced everyone to keep doing it, we would never give God a chance to step in. We'd never give those other congregations a chance to step
right.
in. It's not about me, it's about him. And you get very distorted when you get into that mindset of I have to keep doing.
Yeah.
Almost every call, every action, every day needs to start with, Lord, what do you need from me today?
Right. And I think it's yeah, and to push that a little bit too, because God doesn't need us, right?
No.
It's more of God. I'm yours, so
Mm,
tell me where to go. Lead me where you want to go. I mean, it's semantically.
yeah,
I know what you mean. I know what you mean by that. Because I find myself saying that all the time. Well, God needs me to do this, and then I have to remind myself. I'm like, no, He doesn't. He doesn't need me for anything. Because if He needed me to do something, He wouldn't be God. Now He's called me to things. He has called
Mhm.
you to things, and He's called us to obey when He calls us to go do stuff. Um, but at the end of the day, one of my favorite quotes that I heard from a good friend of mine said, "All God has to work with is sinners," and so we're gonna miss out on those calls. We're going to make choices that are not the best, or we're going to, family of God. We'll do things like, okay, we're going to start up this ministry, or we're going to partner with this, and we're going to do this, and sometimes it just doesn't work out, and that's because maybe we were looking at some other like maybe we wanted to pursue this because of something that we wanted and not necessarily what God wanted. And so then God will kind of slap us on top of the head, and then he'll redirect to the place that he wants us to be. And so having that mindset of waking up and saying, yeah, God, I know you don't need me, but I'm yours to be used, and so use me, please.
Yeah.
I think that's a great mindset to have. Penny, I don't want to go in the direction that we had planned on at the first, because I think that would just mess with the vibe
I agree.
of what we've been having, to the conversation that we've been having. But I do want to ask you one thing. So uh, the podcast is listened to by a lot of supporting congregations that support the family of God, that support the Luke Clinic. If you had one thing to say to someone who is listening that either did not know the Luke Clinic or is interested in the Luke Clinic, what would you want their takeaway to be if they experienced the Luke Clinic, or they heard about the Luke Clinic? Like, what would you want them to know? Most importantly, if there's some most, I know it's probably like like here's the one thing, and then there's like 1A, 1B, 1C. But like, is there something that you just really want people to know
So
about the Luke Clinic and the work that God's doing?
if if you, and you might be male or female, but if you can imagine being a young girl who found yourself pregnant and who did not feel supported, did not feel like they had the things in place that they wanted in place to have that baby, wasn't sure that their family is supportive, or their family is actually pressuring them to have an abortion, what would you want? What environment would you want to walk into? Because in the Lutheran Church, we consider ourselves pro-life, life affirming. But it isn't just about persuading somebody or helping somebody make the decision to keep that baby and not have an abortion. If you were in that situation, you would want somebody not only to listen and to be safe with, but you would want somebody to walk through life with you, not just for pregnancy, not just for that first year of life. You would really want somebody in your life who was willing to stand with you and walk with you and help you process all the different things that you come across. That means pregnancy, getting all your things together. Like, how am I going to provide for this baby? What am I going to give this baby? What am I going to bring this baby home to? I don't know anything. Who's going to teach me? Who's going to be with me on day 2 when postnatal depression kicks in and I really begin to doubt that I've
Yeah.
made the right choice? Who's going to be with me when my parents kick me out because it's too expensive for them to take care of me and the baby and I don't find anywhere to live? Who's going to be with me when the young man who's promised he's going to stay with me bails as soon as his name is on the birth certificate? That is the Loop Clinic. Every single area that we come across that our patients experience struggle, pain, loneliness, disenfranchisement, lack of choice, we step into. Isn't that what all of us would want? And isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we want it to mean when we say pro-life? That the
Mhm.
word pro-life has such a turn off, it's such a the value of the word is just it's divisive. But if we believe that every life is created for a purpose, and we would love every woman to have the choice to keep that child, we would want to create that environment. And that environment isn't just standing outside an abortion center and getting a woman to walk away. It isn't just getting that baby delivered. It isn't just getting that baby to 12 months of old, months of age. It's so much more. And I think intangibly, that's what the Loop Clinic is. It's so much more. It if you wanted to just come in and get good healthcare and leave, you could come in and have good healthcare and leave. If you want to come in and you want to find a mentor, you're going to find a mentor. If you want to come in and find Jesus, you can find Jesus. If you want to be baptized and have a conversation with a pastor or a deaconess about raising your children in a faith-filled environment and what does that even look like and what resources can I get for that? If it's talking about I left school when I was 12 and I've never really dreamt about what I want to do with my life. And maybe it's doing a career test with a mentor and talking about spacing out your family and getting your GED and what kind of job you could do. We do that. Like you can throw a million scenarios at me and we do that. It's not just medical care, it's so much more than that. And for churches and individuals who believe in what it means to be pro-life but aren't sure what that looks like for a congregation, it's praying for the Loop Clinic. It is supporting the Loop Clinic financially. It's saying whatever we've got, we want to bring. It's a congregation who says we don't have money, but we know how to sow, and we're going to make things and donate them. Or we're an aging congregation, and we're far too far from Detroit to come down and do anything. But you know what? We want to support your staff, and we want to send letters of encouragement to your
Yeah.
staff. We want to make snack bags. I mean, you name it. I've never had somebody who didn't have something they wanted to give that God couldn't use.
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage you. I love to come and speak. Invite me to speak because I love to share that we serve El Roy, the God who sees, and he cares about these women. And he has set up a ministry that is nearly $500,000 a year to run. And he has provided that $500,000 because these women matter. So come and join us. Listen in, be encouraged. I'm not coming to your congregation to ask you for money. I'm coming to share with you the joy of what God is doing. And then if you feel led to join us in any way, shape, or form, that is phenomenal. That is phenomenal. But yeah, I think it's what you dream that you would want for yourself or your daughter or your sister. That's what we're trying to do.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I really I really pray that the listener is getting to know that big heart of yours for these women and for the churches, and that they see women and they see life in the way that the Loop Clinic sees that. And joining in that partnership, yes, it's a variety of different ways, and ultimately, what I think what both of us want for the listener as we consider, the missions with you and me and Christian Jones, Pastor Hill, Pastor Nick, Pastor Tim, Deacon John, all these people that are in partnership together. I was just thinking the other day about how Ponda Vida has officially gotten involved because Pastor Granado married a couple that came to
Mhm.
the Loop Clinic, right? I mean, those are the. I was waiting for you to say marriage in when you were going through. If you want to find this, if you want to find this, if you want to get married, come to the Loop Clinic too, because you can get hooked up with a pastor to do that. It's the things that God is doing, I think, at the Loop Clinic is phenomenal. And what I would add to that is what we say about the family of God, which is come and see.
Mm.
Come and see the good things that God is doing there. Come and see for yourself. No matter what you've heard, come and see for yourself what God is doing. I think that you'll be blown away by what the Spirit has been doing. So,
I've
Penny,
got one last
yeah,
quick thing, Tyler, just to be a pain. I think what you just said sparked something in me. One of the things that's most unusual about the Luke Clinic is that it's a place where people who disagree can come together. And I think that's a very unusual thing in the church. We have people who are Christian who volunteer for us and non-Christian. My non-Christians, I call my NPR volunteers. They want to do good and make a difference, and they're valuable people, and they bring a significant amount. We have people who are pro-choice, and we have people who are pro-life, and we come together because we're pro-women. We have Republicans and Democrats. We are hugely supported by doctors from the University of Michigan, and I take nursing students from Michigan State, and we always laugh because they sit on opposite sides of
yeah,
the building with their green and their blue. But I think that's a beautiful picture, is there
yeah.
aren't many places in the world today where we can exist and disagree and yet come together. And I think that's a very powerful thing about what we do that is also something I like to talk about. So I'm sorry just to put that in at the end.
Yeah, that's fabulous. We feel the same way about Family of God with the way that people are and the congregations that we visit. Obviously, I have my amazing blue flag behind me. So but yes, I like to say yes. The differences coming together, broken people coming together. And this is where Luke Clinic, Family of God, Franklin Avenue. This is where the Lord takes dead people and makes them alive, and that's a fabulous thing. Penny, I'm incredibly grateful for your partnership and for all the things that you continue to do. Hang in there. I love you, and I'm grateful for your friendship and for all of the things that you continue to do. Continue to listen to God, and we continue to as we continue this continued partnership moving forward. Thank you so much for being willing to be on the podcast today.
Thank you. I enjoy listening, and I've enjoyed talking to you.
Well, praise God for you, and Penny, I'll see you. Is it next week?
Next week?
We have to figure all that out. So, thank you
Yeah.
again, Penny, and we'll chat soon. I love you.
Heroes never die. Gonna make it to the